there is a critical mass of developers here in Melbourne. So you're amongst peers.
The actual industry in Australia is quite small. Like on an average indie game on Steam will sell like 5% of their units in Australia.
I mean, right now, Melbourne is dominating the sector from a geographic point of view. Over 50% of the game development sector is in Melbourne right now.
The industry in Melbourne at the moment, I think it's very focused on smaller team development. So there's not a lot of AAA out here. There's not a lot of AAA in Australia generally.
The arcade is this fantastic space in the middle of Melbourne, which brings all these game studios, independent developers, students, anybody who's interested in the game development industry in Melbourne together in one space where there's just lots happening and lots of opportunity for people to work together, which I think is really unique to Melbourne.
The arcade is a really cool space that I haven't been to much yet, but there's lots of people working here and it's cool. Yeah, it's very professional. There's so much going on at all times. It's nuts.
So the arcade is a co-working space in Melbourne, Australia. So basically it's just it's where all these different games companies from around the city kind of merge, come on the one location and just all work out of the same buildings. So it's a pretty incredible place to work. Where nobody's basically in the industry, yet we work 10 meters away from Hipster Whale, who made Crossy Road, or Mighty, who have made all these amazing games. League of Geeks and Armello are just down the corridor, and it's just this crazy kind of environment where you're constantly inspired by all these different companies who are being successful in their own different way. It's kind of it reminds you that what you're trying to do is hard, but also possible.
So the Australian games industry has evolved a lot over the past few years. During the global financial crisis, a lot of the larger companies shut down. But that kind of made the way for a lot of smaller independent studios to start up. And so the Australian scene is governed a lot by smaller mobile games, casual games, sort of niche games, and that makes for a really vibrant scene.
So the game development sector in Australia is dominated by indie game development. After the sort of GFC and the crash of the sector in between 2008 and 2010, we saw this great rise in indie developers. So it's really an industry that's being run by itself. It is about creativity, it's about producing our own content, and it's actually an amazing time to be in the sector. It is very collaborative, it's very supportive, and even getting started right now, which is generally pretty tough to do. Starting a game development company is hard. It's the nature of the industry. The Australian sector has built itself around supporting all new startups, so supporting anybody that wants to be in games. So we have this amazingly powerful community of people that just want to help constantly.
One of the real strengths of the Australian industry, and especially Melbourne, is that there's just such a big supportive community. I've had people that I know say, it's not an industry in Melbourne, it is a community, it's a creative community.
How would you describe the difference between indie and AAA?
I think that's a trick question because, as time goes on, those terms become more and more meaningless, if they ever meant anything.
When there's such huge amounts of money involved in AAA production, they have to be very, very careful. When it's more of a passion-driven exercise, when people are making things they love rather than trying to run a business, obviously they're running a business as well, but they're trying to run a business while making things that they love and that they believe in.
When comparing AAA and indie, I would say that AAA obviously has the budget. It has the big, showy, there is a lot of tech and money behind this. It obviously has more marketing as well, whereas indie can fit into any pigeonhole that it wants. Like you have tiny itty bitty games that go on to be successful for whatever reason, just because it really strikes a chord with people, or it can be something that somebody worked on as a passion project for 8 years. It can be almost anything.
So a good example would probably be if you're working for a AAA studio, often, let's just say you're a 3D modeler, you're going to be modeling various versions of a single chair that may be in one scene of the game that people see on the screen for maybe 5 seconds. If you're an indie developer, you're often working in a much smaller studio, less than 10 people. It could even just be you doing it all by yourself. So you have a greater kind of creative hand over what happens.
In a corporate environment, you need to sell a product to stakeholders. Like business owners need to be convinced that what you're building is worthwhile and worth the money and time and effort that you're spending on it. In indie, you pursue something you find interesting. I'm quite lucky in my job, even though I work for a multinational, that I can do that anyway. My job is very flexible and I can pick what I work on based on my interest. This is the great thing about indies.
What was the question?
What are your thoughts about there being
Okay. There being no AAA studios in Australia was definitely a blow when it happened. I had a friend who was doing studying development at the time when the big crash happened, and he straight up just had, like, his tutor straight up had to just be like, oh, hey guys, sorry. I'm sorry this happened to you. Good luck with your lives. That must have really sucked.
That it's really hard to get employed out of university, because generally the smaller studios like us, between like kind of 3 to 15 to 20 people, it's really hard to take on entry-level employees, because you've got to account for like the overseeing of them, because like they're just inherently not going to be as skilled or like as mature or just like understand what they're doing as much as somebody who's spent 3 years in the industry. And AAA studios can actually like handle that because they have so much more money and all that sort of stuff. So what ends up happening is like a whole bunch of people graduate from these games degrees and they just can't find jobs.
The fact that there are no AAA companies in Melbourne or Australia anymore, it's like, cool, the big guys couldn't do it, so why can you? Like, and like there is an indie scene, but realistically, it's like, oh, if a big company can't do what you want to do here, why are you going to do it here?
So it's unfortunate that there are no conventional AAA studios in Australia anymore. It's definitely allowed the indie scene to flourish, but that's through necessity mostly. It's added a lot of flavour to like the local scene. I would say that it's probably easier to get into, like if you're talented, it's now easier to actually get into games than it would have been before. But at the same time, the job security is not there anymore.
I'm not necessarily concerned about the fact that we have no large publisher-owned studios in the console space, because I think we will naturally grow that way anyway, but we will do it at our pace, and we have no one dictating how the sector will grow. The sector is being governed by the sector, not by money, which is rather delightful.
I think the future here is looking pretty positive, provided we can avoid any significant international currency shifts. I think we're going to see Melbourne continue to grow and develop as the hub for game development in Australia.
Well, I definitely see the indie space expanding and growing bigger and bigger. Hopefully it doesn't hit critical mass and collapse again. If AAA could come back, that'd be really cool.
You know, I don't necessarily see Australia developing many giant studios like what you might find in the UK and Japan and the US. But I can see us leading the way in terms of really smart creative ideas by a wide variety of creatives.
So I think the next couple of years in Australia are going to be really, particularly Melbourne, are going to be really interesting, because you have these like big studios like Mighty and League of Geeks, who are, and Gree even like opened up recently, and like they're expanding really, like they're going to be expanding really quickly. So I think, yeah, it's going to be interesting to see like what that does in terms of like graduate employment and just the amount of people working in the industry in general.
It's still on an upward trend. There's no end in sight for the Melbourne indies so far. They're still going to grow. the presence of the new arcade is proof enough of that.
Because I feel like I have that motivation, that passion. Like, you hear all the people all the time saying, just try and you'll get there. And I'm like, maybe if I try hard enough, I'll be that like small fraction of people that actually gets a games job in Australia. It'd be really cool. So I'm gonna work like hell for it. That's what I want from life.